Keanu Reeves steps into a taxi, ready for a quiet ride after a long day. Little does he know, the driver is about to make a grave mistake. As the cab weaves through the city, the driver decides to take advantage of Keanu's fame, overcharging him for a simple ride. But what happens next will shock him to his core, as Keanu's quiet demeanor turns into something far more powerful than he ever imagined. Just moments after stepping out, the driver finds himself face to face with a team of FBI agents. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you love stories like this, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications, because tomorrow, we have another exciting and even more secretive tale coming your way. You won't want to miss it. It was a busy afternoon in downtown Los Angeles, the city's streets packed with traffic as usual. Keanu Reeves, dressed casually in a black hoodie and sunglasses, stood at the curb, waiting for a taxi to take him back to his hotel after a long day of filming. As he stepped into the cab, he greeted the driver with a small smile, grateful for the quiet ride he was about to have. The driver, an older man with a grizzled look and a hint of a smirk, looked him over briefly before focusing on the road. "Where to?" he asked, his tone flat but not unfriendly. Keanu gave him the address, and the taxi began weaving through the maze of cars. But as they passed a few blocks, Keanu noticed the driver's eyes flicker to the rearview mirror more than once, and a strange tension began to settle in the air. After a few moments, the driver spoke again, this time with a different tone, one that wasn't quite as welcoming. "You know," he began, his voice casual, "I usually don't take people to the hotel district for this price." Keanu raised an eyebrow, unsure if he heard correctly. "Excuse me?" he asked. The driver's smirk deepened. "Well, I figure you probably don't know how much it costs for a ride like this. This area? The fancy hotels? It's not cheap. I'll be charging you a bit more for the detour." Keanu frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "I don't understand. The fare's supposed to be standard. That's the way it works." The driver chuckled under his breath, clearly sizing up his passenger. "Look, I'm just giving you a little premium treatment. It's not like you'll miss a few extra bucks, right? You probably make more than that in a minute on one of your movies." Keanu's frown deepened, but he said nothing, deciding to keep his thoughts to himself. He'd dealt with his share of misunderstandings before, but something about this encounter rubbed him the wrong way. The ride continued, the city's skyline stretching out in front of them as the driver took what seemed like unnecessary detours, making the trip longer than it needed to be. Finally, they pulled up to the hotel. Keanu handed the driver the fare, but the man's hand lingered in the air, waiting for more. "You forgot the extra charge," the driver said with a sly grin. Keanu looked at him for a long moment, weighing his options. But instead of reacting as the driver might have expected, Keanu simply handed him the exact fare, and nothing more. The driver's smile faltered, his arrogance replaced by surprise. "Hey, you need to pay me for the detour. It's not right to shortchange me like that." Keanu looked at him quietly, his voice calm but firm. "You're overcharging me. I won't pay for something that isn't fair." He slid out of the cab and shut the door, leaving the driver standing there, stunned. What happened next was beyond what the driver could have ever expected. Just moments after Keanu stepped inside the hotel lobby, an unmarked black car pulled up to the curb. 3 figures dressed in sharp suits stepped out and walked toward the taxi with purpose. The driver's heart skipped a beat. Can I help you?" he asked, his voice wavering now. One of the suited agents flashed his badge, his face stone cold. "We need to speak with you. Now." The driver's stomach sank as he followed them to the car, bewildered and a little nervous. "What's this about?" he asked, trying to play it cool. "I didn't do anything wrong. You've been overcharging customers, particularly one very important one," the agent said, his eyes narrowing. "Keanu Reeves is not someone you want to mess with. And now, we need to discuss your conduct." The driver's face went pale. "Keanu Reeves? Wait, you mean, yes. That man you just tried to overcharge. He's not someone you should have angered," the agent interrupted, his tone sharp. They opened the car door for the driver, and he was ushered in, confused and scared. What had started as a simple fare had spiraled into something much more serious. He had no idea what was going to happen next, but he could tell from the agent's icy expressions that this was no routine conversation. Inside the car, the agents laid out everything they knew: how Keanu had flagged down a taxi, how the driver had tried to take advantage of him by adding extra charges to his ride, and how this wasn't the first time the driver had attempted this with other unsuspecting passengers. "You don't realize who you're dealing with," the first agent said, his voice low. "Keanu is one of the most respected people in this industry. He values kindness, fairness, and integrity. And when people tried to take advantage of him, they don't just get a slap on the wrist. They get noticed." The driver swallowed hard, trying to process what was happening. "I didn't know. I didn't know it was him. I'm sorry," the agent continued, his voice not softening. "That's the thing. You shouldn't have needed to know. Respect and honesty are universal, and if you can't offer that to every person who steps into your cab, then you don't belong in this business. Do you understand?" The driver nodded quickly, his mind racing. He realized he had made a colossal mistake. And worse, he had done it in front of someone who could change his life, not just because of his fame, but because of his values. As the car pulled away from the hotel, the agents left him with one final warning. "You'll be hearing from us again. And we suggest you rethink your approach to people. If not, you'll find yourself in even more trouble than you're in now." After the car dropped him off, the driver stood still for a moment, his legs weak beneath him. He was shaken, but he knew one thing for sure. He had just learned the hard way that respect wasn't about who someone was or what they did, it was about how they treated others, no matter who they were. The next day, the taxi driver's life began to change. He found himself reflecting on the mistake he made and started seeking out ways to turn things around. But there was no denying that the encounter with Keanu Reeves, and the unforgettable lesson it taught him, would stay with him forever. In the following weeks, the taxi driver couldn't shake the weight of that day off his mind. The events had unraveled like a bad dream, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the encounter with Keanu, and the subsequent visit from the FBI agents, had revealed something deeper within him. He'd been living his life through shortcuts, trying to gain more for less. It had all caught up with him, and it was time to change. He decided to take action. The first thing he did was send a handwritten letter to Keanu Reeves. He poured his heart into the note, confessing his actions and the way he had treated him, an iconic figure he had unfairly tried to exploit. The letter was not just an apology, but an honest request to learn from his mistake. He had learned the hard way that every person deserved respect, and he wanted Keanu to know that his life was taking a different direction. Weeks went by without any response. The driver thought that perhaps Keanu was too busy, or perhaps he simply didn't care enough to reply. But then, one afternoon, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but when he picked up, a calm, familiar voice greeted him. "Hello, this is Keanu Reeves." The driver's heart skipped a beat. "Mr. Reeves? Is this really you?" "It is," Keanu replied. "I received your letter. I've been thinking about it. You didn't have to apologize, but I appreciate the honesty. And I'm glad to hear you're making changes." The driver's hands trembled. "I never meant to disrespect you or anyone. I know I messed up. But I'm trying to do better now. I want to be someone who acts with integrity, like you do." Keanu's voice was soft, almost reassuring. "It's a step in the right direction. Just remember, it's not about trying to be perfect, it's about being genuine. Keep that in mind, and you'll find the right path." The conversation left the driver stunned, but in the best way possible. It felt as if a weight had been lifted from his chest. Keanu had not only forgiven him, but had given him the encouragement he needed to continue transforming his life. In the months that followed, the taxi driver kept his promise to himself. He treated every passenger with respect, ensuring that no one felt like they were being taken advantage of. He even went out of his way to help people in need, going beyond just offering a ride. It wasn't long before he became known as one of the most considerate drivers in the city. His reputation slowly but surely turned around. And then, one evening, as he was finishing his shift, a familiar black car pulled up to the curb. The driver's heart skipped. He had no idea who was inside, but the tinted windows lowered, revealing none other than Keanu Reeves himself. Keanu smiled at the driver and waved. "I thought I'd stop by and thank you in person," he said. "I heard about the changes you've made. Keep it up. I'm proud of you." The driver couldn't believe it. Keanu Reeves, someone who had every reason to ignore him, even after the mistake, was standing there, acknowledging his growth. "Thank you," the driver said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Keanu gave him a warm smile before adding, "Life's too short to hold on to the past. You've learned from it. Now go forward and keep making things better for yourself, and for others." And with that, he got into his car and drove away, leaving the driver standing on the sidewalk, feeling more alive than he had in a long time. From that day forward, the driver continued to build on the lessons Keanu had taught him, both through his actions and the genuine kindness that Keanu had shown him in his darkest moment. He would never forget the way Keanu had shown him that redemption wasn't just about saying sorry. It was about taking action, living with integrity, and treating others with respect. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the driver's life, a chapter that was guided not by shortcuts, but by the belief that doing right by others would always lead him down a better road. And every time he looked in the rearview mirror, he was reminded of the man who helped him change his life, Keanu Reeves. As time passed, the taxi driver's transformation became more than just a personal journey. It became a story that others in the community started to notice. His reputation spread far and wide, and passengers began to ask for him specifically, not just because he was a skilled driver, but because he had something rare: integrity. People appreciated that he treated them with respect, no matter their background, and that he made every ride feel like more than just a transaction. One evening, as the driver was finishing another shift, a young woman stepped into his cab. She looked familiar, but he couldn't quite place her at first. She took a seat in the back, staring out of the window, lost in thought. "Hey, you all right?" he asked, his voice kind but concerned. She turned around, startled, then smiled sheepishly. "Sorry. I've just had a rough day. A really rough week, actually." He gave a gentle nod. "Sometimes talking helps. If you want to chat, I'm all ears." The woman sighed and looked at him thoughtfully. "You know, you're not what I expected. Most drivers just want to get through the ride, but you seem different. Like you actually care." The driver smiled, a quiet pride in his heart. "I try to. It's been a long road to get here." The woman tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" The driver took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his own story, but also the pride he had now and how far he'd come. "Well, I wasn't always like this. I used to take advantage of people, tried to get away with a few things here and there. Until one day, I learned a hard lesson from someone you might know." Her eyebrows raised in curiosity. "Who?" "Keanu Reeves." The woman blinked in disbelief. "Keanu Reeves? No way. You met him?" He chuckled softly. "Yeah, I did. And let me tell you, it changed my life. He could have just ignored me after I made a huge mistake, but instead, he taught me something about redemption, about being better, about being real." Her expression softened as she listened, her curiosity turning into genuine empathy. "That's incredible. It must have been life-changing." "It was," the driver said, his voice thick with emotion. "He showed me that you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be genuine, and own up to the things that go wrong. That's how you move forward." The woman sat back in her seat, lost in thought for a moment. I think I need to start making some changes too." He smiled warmly, looking back at her through the rearview mirror. "It's never too late to turn things around. All it takes is one step at a time. And trust me, it's worth it." As they pulled up to her destination, The woman smiled genuinely at him. Thank you for talking with me. I needed to hear that today. Anytime, he replied, watching as she walked away with a newfound sense of purpose in her step. As he drove off into the night, the driver reflected on how his life had changed, not just because of Keanu's kindness, but because of the ripple effect it had created. People around him were starting to see the importance of integrity, of being kind, and of owning their mistakes. It was like a small spark that had caught fire, and he was watching it spread. He knew that Keanu had been right. Life wasn't about perfection. It was about how you chose to handle your mistakes, how you chose to treat others, and how you chose to move forward. And in that moment, he realized something even more powerful. He was no longer just a taxi driver. He was someone who could make a difference, no matter how small, simply by being real. He would never forget the day Keanu Reeves had changed his life, and now, every passenger he picked up, every person he met, was a chance to pass on that same kindness, that same genuine care. And as he drove through the city, he knew that Keanu's message was still alive in him, in the hearts of those who had heard his story, and in every ride he took from that point forward. Keanu had given him more than just a second chance, he had given him a purpose. If this story touched your heart, we've got many more that will do the same. Click the screen to discover more tales of hope, compassion, and resilience that will inspire you.